wonder what your Christmas story is. What are the Christmas traditions that you have in your family? I know that in our family, each year we kind of, in the lead up to Christmas, we kind of remind ourselves of things that we like in our family traditions. We always, for example, we always eat the same breakfast. We always have croissants on Christmas Day. I don't know why, but that's what we've done year after year. We always open our presents after we've gone to church, which is a bit mean for the kids, but we've always done that. We always have turkey, except for one Christmas, which in lockdown we had shepherd's pie, and that didn't go down well at all. We broke with our story. And so we probably all have the same story that we kind of go through each year. And if we look at any of the other Gospels, like Matthew's Gospel or Luke's Gospel, we hear the traditional Christmas story, the facts of Christmas. We hear about the events of Jesus' birth. We hear about how he was born in Bethlehem, how the shepherds came to him, how the Magi came to him, and we hear those facts. But in John's Gospel, we don't hear that. We don't hear any of those Christmas facts. In John's Gospel, he doesn't mention them at all. Yet in John's Gospel, the one I've just read from, we get the true meaning of Christmas. We get the Christmas meaning that is radical and life-changing. And I sort of summarise those into sort of three themes, which are that Jesus is the true God, who became flesh, became human, and came to earth. That Jesus is the true life of the world, and that Jesus is the true light of the world. So let's start with the first one. Jesus is the true God who came flesh and lived amongst us. John starts his gospel with some radical words. He starts with the words, "In the beginning was the Word." Now this word, the Word, would have been the word that everybody kind of caught hold of in his original audience, because the word means logos, is the original translation in Greek, and it had a layered meaning. To his Jewish listeners, they would have heard it and immediately known what he meant, that Jesus was God, the word of the Lord, or God. To his Greek listeners, again, they would have heard the word logos and they would have thought, he's talking about the divine power in the universe, the divine power that brings order, form, and meaning to the chaos. So this word, was really important. He also uses the phrase, "in the beginning," deliberately reminding his listeners that Jesus coming to earth is similar to those words that started creation when God says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." The two events are similar in their impact and importance. John is saying that Jesus existed before creation, before time itself. He's saying, in other words, that when the beginning began, Jesus, the Word, was there. And that was radical. But he doesn't stop there. He goes on, and what he carries on saying is even more shocking. And he says this, that the word of the Lord came and dwelt amongst the people. Now, he could have chosen any other verb. He could have said, the word came and lived amongst the people, but he didn't. He deliberately chose this verb to dwell. And this was an interesting choice of words, because it actually means, if you translate it as Jesus, or the word, came to tabernacle amongst the people, which means is to pitch one's tent. So Jesus came to earth and pitched his tent amongst the people. Now, to the Jewish listeners, again, this was so significant, because the word tabernacle was such an important one in their history. The tabernacle was the tent, the portable sanctuary that had moved around with them when they had moved from place to place in the wilderness. It was a place that later would have become permanent in the temple built in Jerusalem. And it was the place, most importantly, where they did the important things. They had the law of Moses. They did their worship there. They sacrificed the animals there. There was a lampstand that was permanently lit, that would have lit up the whole sanctuary. But most importantly, the tabernacle was the place that God dwelt. When John said these words, he was telling his audience that something spectacular had happened. The Word, Jesus, had come to earth as a human and pitched his tent amongst them. And there's more. In verse 4, if we look, it says this, "In him, Jesus, was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Which brings us to our second point, that Jesus is the true life of the world. And John is very keen to really get that message across to his audience. In his gospel, he says the word life 36 times. Jesus, to his friend Martha, says this: I am the resurrection and the life. To Thomas, his disciple, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And to the crowd, he says, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. So what does it mean to have life? Well, it doesn't just mean that he gives life, it means that he actually is life. When you receive Jesus, that life that he has is in us. He is the source of life. And it's not just life in the here and now, it's life forever. It's everlasting life. Life that begins in this world, with all its darkness and its brokenness, can continue much better into eternity. As C.S. Lewis says in his book Mere Christianity, he says, aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you'll get neither. When we accept the life Jesus has for us, we carry his life in us, and we also carry his light. Because I have a last point here, which is that Jesus is the true light of the world. Now, at this time of year, we can't escape light. Could you go to the next slide? This is a scene that I have near my house. So this is a house that's kind of quite close to us. And each year, for the last decade, they've lit it up like this. And each year, there's a new installation of lights. And they actually do it to raise money for the Children's Hospital. So if you go and take a picture, you donate some money. And people come along, and they drive along to come and see it. Now, this part of the road, actually, is really potholed, and there's a massive puddle. This time of year, it fills up. You have to be careful to drive through unless you splash people. So it really is a good installation of light in quite a dark kind of little corner. But of course, when John's talking about light, he's not just talking about the sparkly lights that we have at Christmas. He's saying this, that Jesus is the true light that will never go out. In January, when this stops, Jesus' light will carry on. It will never fail. It will always be there. And again, John is referencing Genesis when it says there, let there be light. He's reminding his listeners, he's reminding us that there is a light beyond these lights. There is a light beyond the sun, which we don't often see in Bristol, do we? There is something far more glorious. Because he's reminding his listeners that back in Genesis, there was a light that was there, that was glorious, that brought life way before the sun even existed, because the sun wasn't made until day 4. And that is the light that comes from God. And that's the theme that goes through. It runs through the Bible. If you remember back to Moses, when he encounters God as a burning bush, the light from that reminds the readers that God is bright and he's light. There's the pillar of fire that lights the way in the wilderness. There's the light that is created when God's face shines on his people. And in Malachi, we're told the sun, literally the sun of righteousness, will rise with healing in his wings. John's implication is clear. Jesus, who was there at the very beginning, is the only true light. And the message is reiterated later in John's Gospel, when it says this, I have come into the world as light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. So what is it when we live in that light? Well, Jesus, his light, it reveals everything, good and bad, when we're in his presence. His light brings warmth and with it comfort. And most importantly, I wonder, his light is power. Power that is essential for growth and for life. Now, eventually, one day on earth, the sun will stop. It's not going to happen in any generation. We're going to be fine. But it will happen at some point. And apparently, when that does eventually happen, photosynthesis will stop within 24 hours. Within 1 week, there will be no life. Water and air would freeze over, which really makes you appreciate the sun. Right at the moment, even though it doesn't feel like it, the sun is giving us life through its power. But there's hope, Jesus says. The Bible ends with a return to what we saw in Genesis. In Revelation it says this, the city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light. The lamp is its lamp. Which means that God's glory eventually will light up the world. There won't be any need for the sun because it will be the Lamb, God, shining on people. The righteous will walk in the light of God's presence and the glory for all times. So how can we respond to this? Well, there's probably three things that we can do. The first of all is receive the light. Now, maybe you're somebody who's been a Christian all of your life, and maybe you have been living in the light for a long time, but maybe you don't. Maybe you haven't yet received Jesus. Maybe actually you're thinking there's been some dark times, and I'd like some of that light in my life. I want the life that Jesus offers. Maybe there's things in your past that you think, actually, I'm ready to bring them out into the light. And Jesus is amazing because he accepts, he forgives, and he invites you to fellowship with him. With absolutely no you don't have to do anything, you just have to accept him. So if that's you today, you'd like some prayer to receive the light, I'd be happy to pray with you, and so will other people. Maybe you're somebody actually who's been a Christian for a while, and maybe actually think, I do know Jesus is life and light, but maybe you want more of it. Maybe you want to live more in the light. Maybe you want to make sure every part of you is fully surrendered to Jesus and have his light in every part of your life. Again, if that's you, I'd be very happy to pray. And the last one I think really applies, certainly this one I think really applies to me, to witness to the light of Jesus. To be like John in verse 6, where it says this: there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, but he came only as a witness to the light. Now that's our call. We're called, like it says in Matthew 5, verse 14 to 16, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. We're not called to be the light explicitly, but only to reflect the light of Jesus and to give glory to him. And I always think, when you think of these CHRISTINGLEs, but this one doesn't. The tinfoil does mop up all the drips, but actually it kind of represents us as well. We're the tinfoil at the bottom of the lamp, aren't we? We're supposed to be there reflecting God to the rest of the world, so the rest of the world can see how good he is. And I think at this time of year, it's a really good opportunity to do that. So if that, again, is something you want to have more boldness to do,